We've always heard stories of roller coaster accidents. Incidents like the El Loco accident of March 25, 2019, and the Kentucky Kingdom accident of June 21, 2007, have shocked the world in the past and also led to many changes in the theme park industry. However, both events pale in comparison to the Big Dipper roller coaster accident of May 30, 1972, an ugly event that claimed the lives of 5 children while maiming 16 others. This is the horrific tale of the deadliest and most terrifying roller coaster accident ever to occur. You could find the Big Dipper roller coaster on the south bank of the Thames in London at the Battersea Fun Fair. It was originally set up for the 1951 Festival of Britain, a nationwide celebration meant to boost morale in the country. Many people believe that this amusement park, which predated Disney by 4 years, was one of the first theme parks in the modern sense. To give the visitor a sense of being in an entirely different world, the park used exotic-looking architectural facades and fantastical elements. Visitors could travel back in time to a fantastical medieval England. They could take part in the Monte Carlo races, embark on a world cruise, admire a Mississippi-style showboat where vintage Kentucky music was played, or maybe even board a rocket ship bound for the moon. While there were numerous features to lose oneself in pure escapism at the fun fair, the Big Dipper was the most popular ride there by far. The ride, which towered over the park's skyline, had several sharp drops and a section through a large dark tunnel. It was a favorite hangout for young thrill-seekers and frequently drew long queues. On Tuesday, May 30th, 1972, tragedy struck. The Battersea Fun Fair was packed as schools had just begun their half-term break. The Big Dipper queue was longer than usual as kids and teens waited to ride. By 2:30 p.m., about 30 people, mostly children, got on the 3-car train, which had a brakeman as most older roller coasters did. Because of the technology at the time, someone had to manually slow the ride down before the turns and at the end. As usual, the ride began with the haulage rope slowly pulling the train up the hill. But just before the first peak, as the train was being pulled up the first hill, the haulage rope suddenly snapped, sending the whole train skidding backward down the track. As the train sped up, the brakeman fervently tried to put on the brakes, but his efforts failed. According to eyewitnesses, at this point the crowd below started laughing because it appeared as though the train derailing had been planned, either as a prank by the brakeman or as a humorous but innocuous failure of the ride. At one point, even the passengers began to suspect that they were the targets of an elaborate hoax. Sadly, neither was the case, and the train kept speeding up. The laughter turned to screams when the first car derailed around the corner and fell 15 feet. The other 2 cars then hit a stationary train and collapsed some of the wooden hoardings before disappearing behind the entrance area's wooden screens. Some of the passengers were flung out as the accident occurred, and they could be seen hanging upside down over the railings and walkway area, as well as lying on the ground in front of the onlookers. A survivor, Carolyn Adamsick, recalled seeing a girl next to her on the carriage, stumbling and desperately reaching for the handrail and walkway made of wood. She was screaming that she needed to get off, but then the wooden handrail crumbled, and the girl fell to her death. As more children were being crushed, the scene descended into chaos. Onlookers quickly rushed to help those trapped under debris. Tragically, when the dust settled, 5 children had died, 3 at the scene and 2 at the hospital. Other than those killed, 16 other children were seriously injured. At this point, everyone's wondering, wasn't the roller coaster checked before letting people on? Whose oversight caused this awful accident? As people began to demand answers to these questions, the pages of national newspapers were quickly taken over by calls for an extensive public investigation. By February 1973, the ride manager and the engineer in charge of Big Dipper's inspection would be charged with manslaughter. Everyone who followed the case was shocked by the investigation's results. Investigators reported 66 defects, which covered nearly every part of the ride, with 18 of them being in the structural supports. At that time, the Big Dipper was a literal death trap. According to the investigation report, numerous factors contributed to the accident. The first factor was the haulage rope's poor condition, which had snapped during the ascent. In addition, it was discovered that the rope was only partially lodged in its gripping device. The second factor was the malfunctioning safety equipment. In the event that a train started moving back down the tracks, the coaster was equipped with arresters, also known as dogs, which could be used as brakes. There should have been 8 of these dogs on the ride, so why didn't they do their job? Well, to begin with, 4 of the dogs were missing, and of the 4 that remained, 3 were damaged, indicating that only 1 arrestor was working at the time of the accident. Unsurprisingly, the force of the train's backward hurl snapped that arrestor. The third factor was the structure's terrible state. Aside from the excessive algae growth on the emergency walkway, where one of the engineers had even tripped, significant rot was found in 5 other locations. It was this defect that caused the structure to give way underneath the girl who fell to her death. The fourth factor was that the track the train was on was misaligned. This caused the train car to derail, throwing the passengers out in the process. There were also a number of indirect, but no less significant contributing factors, such as the discovery that the roller coaster had experienced a devastating fire earlier in 1970, and that parts which were purchased as replacements at the time were already more than 50 years old. Additionally, Henry Powell, the prosecutor, asserted that the roller coaster employees were just untrained teenage boys. An ex-employee would later testify that both staff and management were always under the influence of alcohol and drugs while at work, and that a similar incident had actually happened the year before, breaking the arm of a passenger. You're not alone if you're wondering how regular inspections could have missed the ride's dire condition. And the answer is that it all boils down to theme park regulations in the 1970s. The truth is, there weren't any regulations at the time. Some funfairs followed a voluntary code of practice, but it had many loopholes. The frequency of the inspections, the type of engineer used, and the definition of qualified were all left largely to the owner. Anyway, these poor health and safety regulations would be used as the primary defense throughout the trial, and in November 1973, both the ride's engineer and manager were found not guilty. The judge argued that the structural engineer's assessment that the ride was safe to ride and to continue operating only applied to the ride while it was stationary, and that he was not required to test and certify the Big Dipper's mechanical side. The ride's manager was acquitted because the jury reasoned that, as an amateur, he lacked the expertise necessary to guarantee the ride's safety. Although the Battersea Funfair disaster did set off a chain of events that led to changes in the law, these changes did not happen as quickly as you might think. After the accident, it took almost 2 years for the fairgrounds to have to follow health and safety rules, which would later be expanded to include the general public. However, as a result of the incident, the park had to be permanently closed, and the whole event came to be generally referred to as a forgotten disaster. In 2021, however, local citizens began to push the initiative to have a memorial in the parking area in honor of the children who lost their lives or were injured there 50 years ago. To mark the 50th anniversary of the disaster, a tree was planted in May of 2022, and a statue is under consideration.